Welcome to part 3 of our 3-part series called A Bridge to Justice, Combating Racism in the Judicial System. As we conclude this section, make no mistake, we are not concluding our listening, we are not concluding our work. We know that there is such good in the legal system, but there is also brokenness that we must mend. And it is brokenness and racism that isn't just the result of recent events, it's been a 400-year plus journey. We can work together to make a difference. And as you'll hear in this final segment, we can't just look at the layers of the judicial system, we've also got to think about what impacts bringing people there. Inequities in education, inequities in healthcare, inequities in access to jobs and to meaningful life. We've got to be a part of working together. And we can as we seek to truly love more. I thank you for listening. I look forward to hearing from you. And if you have further questions, please feel free to check out my website, sarahcrossmansullivan.com. It'd be a joy to hear from you. Judge Carnesale, I wonder if you could explain to me a little bit. I've heard some about, in my experience in other places, about accountability courts. Could you and some of the others on the panel talk about that, what that is? Is that an option to help in healing, to help when we've got especially young perpetrators, to try to provide restoration as opposed to a life in prison?
Thank you for asking me about this. What I keep hearing that rings so true to me is it boils down to whether you're dealing with individuals either in law enforcement or as criminal defendants, prosecutors, judges who have dehumanized other people based on anything. You asked earlier about prosecutors mistreating or not using appropriate judgment in cases. And I think that it's possible for people to work within the system and eventually develop this idea that people who have dehumanized someone else are no longer human. And that's something we deal with in court on a daily basis. Judges have to determine whether they're dealing with a predator who has dehumanized everyone, who is a threat to society and should be removed, or whether they're dealing with someone who either because of deficits in education, trauma in their childhood, which brings so many people to the courts, or other reasons, whether they've made bad decisions, even if those decisions are very serious in terms of the charges that they are facing. Fulton County has accountability courts. We have one program that's not court-wide that I would love to see go court-wide. It's called My Journey Matters. It's run by Judge Sean LaGrua, and it's an acknowledgement that there are young men and women in the system whose lives should not end at age 20, 19, 18, 21 because of a mistake that they made where they're facing due to mandatory minimum prison terms, decades in prison. It's acknowledging that we've made the decision at that point for that person, your life is essentially over. You've got a felony conviction, you're going to be unsuccessful in life now. So inmates can be referred to that program if Judge LaGrua will take them, but it's not countywide. And the emphasis is on education, developing social skills. There are mentors in the program to help young men and women, and to be honest, it's mostly men, but there are women too, find the resources they need to be successful adults. But people who are viewed by the judges who refer, or by Judge LaGrua, who hosts this program in her courtroom, are not permitted in the program. So there's an essential determination that is made of, is this someone who can be rehabilitated, or someone who is a permanent threat to society? And I think that that's a real step forward in terms of recognizing that most of the young offenders we deal with are getting out. So to say to a young person who is 18, 17 years old, which I have in my courtroom all the time, you are going to prison for the next 20 years. I hope you'll do well when you get out 20 years from now, I think is a naive statement because the truth is, unless individuals get a life without parole sentence, they're coming back into society. So it's of critical importance to try to see what's going on with the individual. And that program says exactly what I think every judge should consider. Your journey matters. How did you get here? How did you come to us? And I think that when you view everyone in the system, whether it's victims or defendants, and frankly, lawyers, because there are judges who really mistreat lawyers. We've all been on the receiving end of some pretty unfair treatment from judges. But if you see everyone that comes before you as a human being, if you don't dehumanize someone just because they're in the system, you begin to care whether they have a future. If you don't, if it's just a number, if it's just a big caseload that you've got to move, well, who cares if they go to prison for 20 years and have no life? But when you care about someone as a human being, you're looking at what the ripple effect is going to be for that person, for every member of their family, for the people that they encounter and may re-victimize, and for those people themselves, just having no hope and having a devastating life that ended badly. So I think it's critically important for judges and prosecutors to determine whether accountability courts, meaning courts that allow intervention into people's lives to deal with core issues, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, any of the different factors. We have a veterans court in Fulton County too, whether people warrant that chance to have a different outcome than decades in prison. So I'm a real believer in that. I think it's naive to say just put everyone in prison for possible because they're coming back. That's not to say there aren't members of our society that don't just need to be removed for as long as possible. As a former prosecutor, I'm not naive about that, and I'm not afraid to impose a long sentence for a predator. But judges who care and prosecutors who care give some thought to what the outcome is going to be for that defendant and for the people around them permanently. They're big decisions. There's nonstop conversation in Fulton County about caseloads because we all have hundreds of cases. And when I came into office 11 months ago, I inherited over 300 criminal cases. I have cases that people have been sitting in jail for years. And it's important to move those cases, critically important. But if you see them only as, number 200 and you try to push them through the system, there's a good chance you're not going to do justice for that person. So
goes back to what Judge Hill said about that everybody has a name. We honor everybody. And Fani Willis, I believe you want to say or share something.
Yeah, let me jump in here. And Judge Carnesale, this is not to demean any member of the bench, so please don't take that what I'm about to say. But this is why your DA matters so much. The reality is, if Judge Carnesale has 300 cases, the DA has 300 times 16. If correct decisions have been made on the front end, My Journey Matters becomes the program of the district attorney. And therefore, people don't get charged. They don't end up on these judges' cases loads, and we get to restore them from the beginning. This is the reason I am so passionate about the journey that I am on, because we are going to be able to touch so many lives by, from the onset, not putting the scarlet letter of an indictment on people and letting them go through programs and get rehabilitated. Being able from the very beginning to have people that assess cases and immediately send them into the accountability courts. Because as beautiful as all those courts that Judge Carnesale just mentioned are, the DA controls who gets to go there and who doesn't. And I would say that those programs are underutilized, that we should use them till they are at capacity and busting at the seams, so that the judges can go say, we need more monies because we need more people in these programs so we can change more lives around. And this is an issue that is just really, really important. And she's absolutely right. Everybody doesn't get to go to a program. Some people are predators. But if each of those judges had less of a caseload, and each of the prosecutors assigned to their courtrooms, and by the way, they're going to have more prosecutors assigned with me because I'm not going to have an election committee. I'm going to actually have people in the courtroom doing the business of the people. Then those cases don't languish that are serious. Even those people get their day in court. At some point, it's, if you're ready, then be ready for trial. But you can't do that effectively with 300 cases. You can't do that effectively with staff that just keeps going and going and going. The office needs stability, and it needs programs to divert so that Judge Carnesale and her colleagues don't see that kind of case count. They see a lower case count where prosecutors are ready and raring to go.
Yes, and it sounds like accountability courts offer something for Dr. Alexander, Judge Hill, for you, Fani, for Judge Carnesale, and that it's a unique opportunity to bring in the entire compass of the justice system, that we can bring in officers, we can bring in not just prosecutors, but other attorneys to serve as mentors and work with judges, work with solutions to helping people heal. And we know that's what it is about. I want to be cognizant of time. I want Judge Hill. I don't want to cut you off. You jump in here real quick, but we're on a tight time crunch. But I want to honor you.
I'll make it quick. But when we talk about accountability courts, I'd love to be heard. Because Fani's right. If the district attorney were to have a program before the cases got to court, then they wouldn't get to the judge. However, we all know that oftentimes they end up with an indictment and they end up in the courtroom. As a Superior Court judge here in Cobb County, I will have a program. And my program will focus on youthful offenders, because youthful offenders oftentimes have bumps in the road, but it does not have to determine the outcome of the rest of their lives. And what I will do is bring in volunteer professionals from our community who can serve as mentors to these young men and young women who sometimes just have not been exposed to the possibilities of life. And by having these mentors, by having speakers come in and talk to issues that are relevant to their demographic, self-esteem, job training and trades, and requiring them to get a GED or some trade certificate. We all talked about this past week when Mayor Lance Bottoms sort of became the mama of Atlanta. I often find myself on the bench being the mama that has to be the one to say, this is what you're going to do, and you don't have a choice. And I'm okay with that, because one day, and I'll tell them, one day you may decide you don't want to break in somebody's car and you want to do something else. You're going to have to at least have this GED. You're at least going to have a trade certificate. You have to be equipped to move forward in life. And I will have a program that I hope will help equip some of these young offenders to move forward in life and not let this one bump in the road be the determining factor for the rest of their lives. So that's why I couldn't let the accountability court discussion move forward without at least being heard, because I'm extremely passionate about this. And
I'm honored you jumped in. That's fantastic. And I think it's especially critical, this acknowledgement of us talking about this, because, you know, this discussion was titled A Bridge to Justice. You were all talking so poignantly about the bridges we can build so that others can cross. And we need to remember, too, to highlight the stories. We all know people who have been in the criminal justice system, who were defendants, who have come out, who have become officers, who have become prosecutors, who have done powerful things in community because they were afforded the chance. But too few times we don't give them that leg up, that lift. But it has to start at the time before arrest. What are we doing, as you all have so eloquently stated, to honor the story? I want to end with this, and I want to hear from every single one of you on this. And as I prep this up, I want to share with you a quote that's been shared a lot over the last couple of days. And here's the quote. It's from Benjamin Franklin. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged by those who are. Powerful quote. But don't you find it interesting that we are still quoting someone who's got a murky past when it comes to equality, who's got an issue with finding equality for Native Americans, for people of color, for women? So what do we do? Do we keep trying to find the good? How do we deal with the issues of the past? How do we deal with people who are angry of the concept of 1619 and don't want to deal with 400 years of systemic racism? My question in giving you that foundation is, I'd like each of you to answer, if we are all called, no matter our faith or no faith at all, to in some way love our neighbor, how do we, in fact, in this time and moving forward, truly, earnestly, ethically love more? Talk to me, please, Fani.
Well, I'll have to tell you, and it's probably not going to be a popular view. One thing that I have liked about watching the protest is that it is not just young African-American people out there. It is young Caucasian children too. Perhaps we've done a decent job with raising this next generation, because they are absolutely saying in a united front, I'm talking about people 30 and under, we're not going to accept this. This is not okay for our brothers and sisters. And that to me shows that there is some progress. Now, do I agree with you running in Foot Locker and stealing? No, the message gets lost there. But the peaceful protesters that are just out there together saying that this has not been accepted, I've been happy to see that there are as many African American faces in the crowd as there are young white faces in the crowd. And so for all of this ugliness, I do see lights of hope. And I do see that that next generation may get us further than we have gotten. Because quite frankly, there has not been enough progress from my father's day till now.
Judge Carnesale, as we hear those amazing words and we acknowledge this is not okay, how do we love more?
Watching TV Friday night, I had a memory. I just hadn't thought of this in 30 years, really. But my first experience in Atlanta was during the ACC tournament in 1989, the spring of 1989. And I came to Atlanta to watch Chapel Hill beat Duke. And my roommate had a lot more money than I did. So I had money for a game. And then I wandered around Atlanta, seeing the city. I was raised in Wyoming. I always imagined I would be a city girl. And so I was so excited to wander around Atlanta. I found my way into a movie theater that doesn't exist anymore. So the games were being played at the old Omni Coliseum. And at the then brand new CNN Center, there was a multiplex. And I found my way into a movie theater. I sat down. They were tiny little intimate theaters. And right before the movie started, I looked up and I realized that I was the only Caucasian. I was the only white person in the theater. And we were watching a movie, Lean on Me, that I understand is controversial now, but in 1989, everyone, including 1989 Rachelle, loved that movie. It was about an African-American principal that brought tough love to an inner city school and saved the day. So as the movie ended, everyone started to sing the song Lean on Me, which was at the end of the movie. And I realized that the person on my left and my right both reached into my lap and took my hands. And we sang, all of us, that song. And at the end, the whole group was singing, our hands were in the air, and it was like a religious moment. That's amazing where we were in 1989, that a whole audience of African Americans saw a naive, hick, white kid wander into a theater and made sure I felt comfortable. I would love for Atlanta, with our history and the richness of our culture, to lead the way in terms of moving forward from these devastating things that have just crippled our country, to be honest, at the moment. Atlanta should lead the way, given our colleges, given our history, given everything about Atlanta. Why can't we be the ones to move the ball on this? Whether it be through open dialogue like this, or training, or who's in office, or anything else, Atlanta should lead the way. I think that I'll just echo what everyone else here said about it, because to be honest, they're smarter than I am about this. I think that we love each other by seeing each other as human beings, regardless of race, recognizing our own biases, and just trying to do better. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you, Judge Carnesale. Judge Hill, tell me, how do we lean on each other? I come to your courtroom, how do I best lean on you? How do we walk forward? How do we continue to say that this is not only not okay, but enough? Enough. How do we love more?
We love more by being open and honest. And again, if we're not open and honest, then we're not going to see our way past this issue. But the moment we are open and honest with ourselves and with one another, which means we have to be okay with using our voices when somebody has said or done something that is not necessarily appropriate, speaking up and say, you know what, that was not okay. And calling people out and trying to educate people. And if you can see me as a person, then you can see someone who looks like me as a person. And being okay to have that discussion. We've got to be able to confront these really sad realities that we are all facing today. And until we are open and honest about it and acknowledge them and utilize our voices and speak up and make calls to action and ask everyone to accept some degree of responsibility, then until we do that, we won't be able to move forward. But I do believe, because as Fani said, the next generation, we may not agree with the way they're doing it, but they have called to action. They have moved forward. And I have heard some of the younger people say, well, you know what? Your generation tried it and it didn't work. It didn't work your way. So if we can all come together, confront it, I mean, it's in our faces now. But it was in our faces back in whatever year Rodney King existed. It was in our faces when Ferguson happened. It was in our faces when Trayvon Martin happened. So what I am hoping is that we will keep this conversation open, that we will continue to confront these really tough realities and see each other for the human beings that we are, have humanity, have compassion, have discussions. And in that way, we can see each other as people. It's the human beings that we are. And it's hard not to love people. You gotta love people. I love people. And hopefully we will all get to a point where we see one another as people and not just as a color. So that's how I think we go forward and love one another.
Judge Hill, to powerfully say we gotta love, and that is our highest calling, but it is our hardest calling. Dr. Alexander, we began with you, we close with you with such gratitude for your brave work, for your light in darkness. I close with remembering the powerful recent words of Ambassador Young when he talked about two things. One, that perhaps we let people think they were free and we weren't there yet. He also, in the last couple of years, in a very poignant meeting, raised his hand in Atlanta. And, Ambassador Young doesn't need to raise his hand. We know who he is. We honor him. And he talked about, in all the pains and all the problems, we are called to pastor each other. I ask you, smart, wise, compassionate Dr. Alexander, who's such a leader, how do we love more?
Well, love is defined differently by different people, but I will say it like this. It's important that we have compassion for each other and that we be patient with each other. And there are some people who have a spiritual center or a belief in a God or a belief in something or someone. They have a center. And then there are those who may not. But what you do have, and we all have, hopefully, is a soul, the ability to think about something and somebody other than ourselves. Because I think there's the only service we really have on the face of this earth, to be honest with you, and that is to serve someone else. To serve yourself to do what? But to serve others to do a lot and to make a change and leave a footprint. And some people have the capacity to love wholly, and there are some people who may not, because we all walk and we all come from different parts of life. But if we just allow ourselves to care about somebody, to smile at someone, or to lift someone up when they're down, something simple, it doesn't cost you anything. That makes all the difference in the world. But let me say to the three other wonderful guests that you have, and as they move through their venture, it is so incredibly important to the public, particularly right now, that we have judges and that we have DA offices in which people feel they're going to be fairly and equitably treated, and particularly people of color. Because one of the things that, and I can tell you this, having been a lawman and having been in and out of a whole lot of courts, managing a whole lot of events, even many of the events we see today, officer-involved shootings and incidents that were questionable. And if you, and particularly to DAs in this country, there are people in this country right now who do not trust police departments. They don't trust them doing their own internal investigations. and they don't trust their DA officers. And people need to feel, whoever their district attorney is, when that case is brought before them, whether it's an officer being charged or whether it's a civilian that's being charged, that they're going to be treated equally and fairly. And when a DA does an investigation that involves any police officer, he or she who are sitting in that role can separate themselves from people that they work with, closely with, right? In the criminal justice system. Because one thing that I did when I was at DeKalb, I stopped doing officer-involved shootings that were deadly. I stopped doing them. I gave them all to the GBI. Why? Because one thing that I found that was so important to me is not that we weren't doing good internal investigations, but the perception of the citizens were, how do you do an officer-involved shooting involving police officers doing the investigation who is working with a DA's office? And to many people, the perception is that it's not going to be done fairly and equitably. And whether that's their truth, and there's many truths around that, or whether it's their perception, we have to regain and recapture a judicial system that we all know, all of us know, has been unfair to poor people, Black and white, and particularly to people of color in this nation. So whether we are police officers or chiefs or sheriffs or judges or DAs, we have to set that example. We have to be the one that people believe in us, that we're going to do the right thing regardless of who come before that judge or who come before that DA's office. Because what we see in the streets right now in America, and you're going to go home, at home, you're going to watch tonight, are people who are rebelling against a system that has treated them unfairly, and those who have been white and privileged, many of them are just as outraged because they know it's not fair. They know it's not right. So when you talk about how do we best love each other, it's do what's right. Do what's right by God and do what's right by the U.S. Constitution. Because one thing I'm going to make this country do, I'm going to make this country do exactly what they say they're supposed to do. That's what I'm going to hold this country to.
I thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. I know that there is no way that we have even touched the surface of trying to heal, but it's a beginning. May we continue to talk. May we continue to work together. I ask all of our listeners to be a part, to get engaged, to be brave leaders in your community, in your homes, and in your places of work. Have the hard conversations. And if you want to know more, if you want to know how to have them, how to lead with love, feel free to reach out to me directly at sarahcrossmansullivan.com. Dr. Alexander, Judge Hill, Judge Carnesale, Fani Willis, I thank you for the light you bring to this world. I want to tell you that you are loved and you deeply, deeply matter.